Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to install your Seleno City, Smart Seleno City, Seleno Live, and Smart Seleno Live lawnmower by Gardiner system. A robotic lawnmower that mows the lawn automatically is of course there, but to make this job proper, we will need a um, a charging station first. Before we install the wires, we can have a look what's going on in our garden, of course. The first thing is we will need a power supply. We have to look where we going to install the charging station, because the charging station itself comes with three functions: to send control signals along the boundary wire, to send control signals along the guide wire, so that the product can follow the guide wire to specific remote areas, for example in the garden, and can find its way back to the charging station, and of course to charge the product. A power supply which is connected to the charging station and a 100 up to 240 volt power outlet is necessary, and a loop wire which is laid around the work area and around the object and plans that the product must not run into. The loop wire is used both as boundaries wire and a guide wire too. And we make a mark on the maybe blueprint or in your head where to put the charging station, the boundary wire and the guide wire, of course. So make a plan step by step. Make a mark on the blueprint where the guide wire connects to the boundary wire. That you have to see in your imagination, for example, or on the blueprint. Then, of course, we should fill holes in the lawn. We cut the grass before we install the product. We make sure that the grass is maximum 4 centimeters and 1.6 inches. Of course, the first week after installation, the perceived sound level when cutting the grass may be higher than expected. When the product has cut the grass for some time, the sound level is much lower, of course. So let's start now. We have to keep a minimum of 2 meters, these are 6.6 feet, of free space in front of the charging station. This is the first thing. And we keep a minimum of 30 centimeters, that are 12 inches of free space to the right and left of the center of the charging station. So let's have a look where we are going to have this. Oh, that's a good spot. We put the charging station near the power outlet. We put the charging station on the level surface, of course. The base plate of the charging station must not be bent. That's really important. And if the work area has two parts, we separate it with a slip slope, for instance. We put the charging station in the area with protection from the sun. If the charging station is installed on an island, we make sure that it connects to the guide wire of the island too. And then we are ready. So we have it. The place is there. And then we can put it together and start with the installation process. So let's start with the boundary wire. There must be a barrier of minimum 15 centimeters, 6 inches in height between the boundary wire and the water bodies, stalls, pedestrian place, or public roads. This will prevent damage of the product, of course. We do not let the product operate on gravel. We do not make sharp bends when we install the boundary wires. For careful operation without noise, isolation all obstacles such as trees, roots, and stones. The boundary wire should be put as a loop around the work area. Sensors in the product senses when the product approaches the boundary wires and the product select another direction. All parts of the work area must be maximum 50 meters that are 50 feet from the boundary wires. To make the connection easier between the guide wire and the boundary wire, it is recommended to make an outlet where the guide wire will be connected. Okay, we make to make that for example an island or something else will help us in this option. Some obstacles are resistant to a collision, of course. For example, trees or bushes that are more than 15 centimeters or 5.9 inches in the height. Then the product will collide with the obstacle and then select a new direction. We put the boundary wires to and around the obstacles to make an island, for example. We put two sections of boundary wires to and from the island to close together. This will make the product run across the wire. We put two sections of boundaries wires in the same stack. Job's done. And of course, we can make a really easy process if we are going to make a secondary area, for example. We can form a secondary area if the work area has two areas that are not connected with a passage. The work areas with the charging station is then the main area. And of course, we can make a second area. We put the boundary wire around the secondary area to make an island. Okay, so that's a big island after this, but we can choose and use it as a second area. That's possible. The boundaries wire must be put as a loop around every work area. That means the A and B spot. So we put the guide wire after this process in the center of that. So take care in your mind that you have to handle this. We are going to send this boundary line around our garden. And if there are trees or something else in the area where our lawnmower should not be smashed to, then we can make an island. And this island is really easy to create because we are going to use the boundary cable and get this boundary cable to an island and form an island with that, come back and go to the station. So we can go and make a complete loop around our garden by using the boundary cable and come back to the power station. That means we have the go area with the boundary line on the left side of the station, and we come back with the line on the right of the station. You can dig the boundary line under plates or under edges or under the ground for up to 20 centimeter, or you use them by spikes and let them rest on the area of your garden completely. So you see, it's easy to install that, but of course you should make areas where there are dimensions. So we have to put the boundary wires around all of the work area, of course. We put the boundary wires 35 centimeters at 14 inches from an obstacle that is more than 5 centimeters, 2 inches height. That's a really important thing. And of course, we put the boundary wire 30 centimeters at 12 inches from an obstacle that is 1 up to 5 centimeters or 0.4 up to 2 inches height. We put the boundary wire 10 centimeters, these are 4 inches, from an obstacle that is less than 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches height. And if we have a paving stone path that is in the level with the lawn, we put the boundary wire below the paving stone. Really cool. The paving stone is minimum 30 centimeter, 12 inches wide. We use then, in this case, factory setting for driving past wire function to cut all the grass adjusted to the paving stone. And then we are done. We put the boundary wire in a slope. The product can operate in 35% of slopes. Slopes that are too steep must be isolated with the boundary wire. The gradient is present in calculation as height per meter, example 10 centimeter, 100 centimeters, and are 10%, for example. So, and then we have it with the boundary line. And don't forget that you have to make a little loop, so a little bit space for the wire to connect the guide wire with the boundary wire. That's really important. Think about that, because maybe you have not enough wire if you are do not think about this while you install the boundary wire. Okay, so let a little loop for the guide wire in your planning, in your assembling, in your installing process. And if you completed the boundary line, you go from the left side to the right side and come back to the station. You can cut the boundary line, because you will need the boundary line which is left or for using as a guide wire too, because the lines are the same, but the job is not the same. Boundary is done. Let's start with the guide wire. We put the guide wire from the charging station through the work area and connect it to the boundary wire. The installation of the guide wire is an important thing for a successful guide calibration. We put the guide wire in a line at a minimum of 1 meter and 3.3 feet in front of the charging station. But first we start at that station. We let a little bit left out of the station of the guide wire, and then we snap it into the charging station bottom plate, and then we can start with the installation process. We put the guide wire minimum 30 centimeters and 1 feet from the boundary wire. We are going to start out of the station. The minimum distance is 60 centimeters, that are 2 feet perpendicular to the guide wire. If less distance, the calibration process will be interrupted. For the widest possible guide corridor, we have a minimum distance of 1.35 meters and 4.5 feet. Where the guide wire is connected to the boundary wire is your thing, but there should be a loop which you prepared on the boundary line. So we can start, and now we can get through the area of our garden with that. The product always runs in the guide corridor, but change the distance of the guide wire, of course. So we are going to try to guide the guide wire to all areas, but with a big distance. And of course, we use the guide wire for small corridors to let navigate our lawnmower through that corridor. And if we are going to all points and install it with sticks, or we dig it under the ground, up to 20 centimeters possible, we will stay, and then we come to the boundary line in a direct way, of course, not in a circle way, in a direct way, and we are there at the boundary line, and then we can connect it over there. So we have a guide wire that our lawnmower is on the right, but it can be found the way home by using the guide wire. Except we are going to use the guide wire to navigate through small areas. That is an important thing for the guide wire too, that we use this guide wire for guide our lawnmower in corridors or something else. But to find back to the charging station is a big thing, that our lawnmower come back to home by using the guide wire. That's the guide wire installation process. Done, baby! Let's install the charging station. Obey national regulations about electrical safety, of course. The product is only to be used with the power supply supplied by Gardena itself. We do not put the power supply at a high where there is a risk that can be put in water. We do not put the power supply on the ground too. We do not encapsulate the power supply. We condense the water can harm the power supply and increase the risk of electrical shock. And of course, we do not make new holes in the charging station plate. We do not put our feet on the disc plate of the charging station. And the power supply cable and the extend cable must be outside the work area to avoid damage to the cables, of course. When connecting the power supply, only use a power outlet that is connected to a resident current device, an RCD. So we can start then. We're going to have a look at the charging station. We do not attach the charging station with the screws of the ground until the guide wire is installed, of course. We connect the low voltage cable to the charging station. We put the power supply at a minimal height of 30 cm at 12 inches. We connect the power supply cable to the power outlet. When the charging station is connected, it is possible to charge the product. We put the product in the charging station while the boundary and the guide wires are being laid, for example. We put the low voltage cable in the ground with the stakes or bury the cable. But first we connect the wire to the boundary wire and the guide wire together. For this, we put the boundary wires around the work area, of course. We start in complete installation behind the charging station. Then we can start to connect it. This is really easy because this is an easy connection. We have to connect the boundary and the guideline together at one part. And for this, we can put the wire into position. Easy peasy, baby. Two ends of the boundary wires and the end of the guide wire comes into the coupler. We make sure that we can see the ends of the wire through the transparent area of the coupler. We push down the cover on the coupler with adjustable pliers to attach the wires in the coupler. We attach the guide wire to the ground with stakes or bury the guide wire in the ground. And then we can go to the connection on the charging station and perform there the additional connection. So let's now install the boundary wire and the guide wire into our station. We are going to put the wires around all over the working area, of course. Job's done. Yeah. Then, of course, we are ready. On the back side of our power supply, we have an L, an R, and a guide. The guide is the guideline. This is in the center to install. L is on the left side if you stand in front of the Gardena power station. And R is the boundary line which comes from the loop home. So, to make this happen, we go now and open the connector. And then we put the boundary wires in the connector. We close the connector with a pair of pliers. Then we cut the boundary wire 1 up to 2 centimeters, 0.4 up to 0.8 inches above each connector. We push the right connector onto the metal pin on the charging station with the mark R. And we push the left connector onto the metal pin on the charging station with the mark L. And, of course, we have to perform the same thread with the guideline, because the guideline is the same like the boundary line, but it is another connection. It is the center connection, the guide connection. Then, of course, we open the connectors and put the guideline wire in the connector. We close the connector with a pair of pliers. We cut the guide wire 1 to 2 centimeters, 0.4 to 0.8 inches above each connector, and we push then, of course, this into the connector where guide is shown. And after this, we are able to install it easy peasy. Yeah. Important. Twin cables or a screw terminal block that is insulated with the insulation tape are not satisfactory splices. Soil moisture will cause the wire to oxidize and after a time result in a broken circuit. So then we are ready to check our installation, because we can then make an power supply available, and then we can see our result. If we can see a green LED already, everything is fine, installation is completed. If there is a yellow or a blue LED, that's a probe indicator and you have to make troubleshooting after that. So have a look, job's done, baby. If there is a green LED on. Yeah! Let's install now the ground station. Completed. We have for this job, we have 4 button screws, and we will now tighten that screws onto the ground, and then we let the station with that ground spikes, ground screws, let them into position in a solid way, of course. For this, we are going to use the tool. This tool is easy to handle, as you can see. And then our installation jobs is really completed. And wow, we are ready for the first test run with our lawnmower automatic robotic device. Celeno Power is there. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe me and give me a positive feedback. And I hope to see you again on my channel. Soon.